and Giorgio, author of Survive the Economic Collapse. And today I'm very happy to have with us David Icke. Hello, David.
Hello.
So you join us from the UK?
Yes, from the Isle of Wight, a little island just off the south coast, just off
I've been there.
Portsmouth.
It's very nice in most of the year. Most of the year is nice.
Yeah, nice day today actually.
Good. You have the typical English summer is starting.
Well, yeah, because it's been pretty wet overnight. Yeah, so it is a typical English summer, really.
Yeah, it's a lovely part of the world, and I'm glad you're not traveling today, so you can be with us for 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
I wanted to thank you. I've been reading your latest book out, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. Excellent book. I advise it to our listeners. Actually, I've read before The Phantom Self, which I found very, very interesting for anyone who wants to improve himself and understand himself. And I must admit that I've been a very recent reader of yours.
Right. Because
in the past, I've heard your name, but the way the media portrayed you, basically, I thought, oh well, you know, all this crazy stuff is not interesting for me. But I've read two of your books, and I must say that at least on most of what you write, the media are lying, from what I've heard, because
the media are lying. Oh, how can you say that? The media always tell the truth. It's what they're there for.
You don't seem an extremist at all, from what I read. You're not an anti-Semite. You're not a racist. You're not a far-right, whatever.
No.
Now, I've been called these names as well for the same reason, of course.
But if you want to silence someone for something they're saying that you don't want people to hear, then lie about them and demonize them. It's as old as history.
Now, some of the things I read there are extremely challenging for anyone who's had the normal education and has been exposed to the normal media for years. So, some of what is inside, I still need to research to see if I agree or disagree with you.
Okay.
But there's a lot of it which I completely agree, and I think you're one of the few who is putting the links between. Then I'll stop talking and let you go. And you're one of the few who connects the dot between finance, between military-industrial complex, between the New World Order and the globalist organization and agenda, and puts it all together to explain the real state of the world today and the real enslavement of people that is being set up worldwide. And it's not just Europe and the US, it's really everywhere.
Everywhere.
So perhaps to start, can you tell us a little bit how you got to this? What's your background? What led you? What is the process that led you to all these thoughts and ideas?
Well, you just have to excuse me. It's the sun's coming through the window, and I'm starting to get sweat in my eyes.
No problem.
So if I rub my eyes, that's why I'm doing it.
It's like helicopters.
I've had rather a strange life, really, a very interesting one. I started out as a professional footballer. That finished with arthritis when I was 21. I then went into journalism in newspapers and radio and television. I was a national presenter, news and sport presenter for the BBC. Then I became involved in the British Green Party and became a national spokesman for the British Green Party. And I left that when I realised that it's just another name for the same basic political mentality. And then I had rather a amazing experience, or series of experiences. From the turn of 1989, when I was in a room alone, it was like I wasn't alone. It was like there was something there, some presence. And I experienced this for a year. And it got more and more powerful, more and more tangible. And I ended up in the spring of 1990 in a hotel room where I was working for the BBC, sitting on a bed in an empty room, saying out into the room, if there's something there, would you please contact me because you'll drive me up the wall. And a very long story short, there's so many elements to it, which I describe in the books. I ended up visiting a psychic for no other reason than to tell her nothing and see if she would pick up. I'd never been to a psychic before. Pick up what the heck I was I was experiencing around me. And I went a couple of times and had a nice chat. She thought I'd gone for hands-on healing, which she did, because I've got arthritis, although it hardly affects me now. And then on the third visit, she goes into psychic mode and starts telling me that this presence that says she's connecting with is telling me what my future is, and it's to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets. That there were enormous secrets that the population, humanity, needed to know, and were being kept from them. One of the lines she came out with was, "One man cannot change the world, but one man can communicate the message that can change the world." And along with that was basically, from this point, you're going to be led to knowledge, and at other times knowledge will be put into your mind, so you'll just know it. And all I can say is, from that moment, that's exactly what happened. I started in the most synchronistic way, bumping into, coincidentally, people, books, documents, personal experiences, and so on, that were like handing me puzzle pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. It started off in the early years where all the information that was coming in the synchronistic way was about what you might call the five sense world, the one we're aware of. That world of everyday experience, what people call the real world. And then from about the kind of mid-late 90s, from about probably 1996, the subject moved in. It still continued with all the other five sense level things, which it has to this day. But then another subject came in, and that was that this network of secret societies and bloodline families, which this synchronicity had allowed me to uncover up to that point, were actually controlled beyond human sight by a force that's not human. And then the real big penny drop for me came just after the turn of the millennium, when another subject came into my life. And what has happened is, when a new subject comes in, suddenly that information about that subject is coming to me from all angles. And exactly the same happened with the third main subject, which was the nature of reality itself. What is this world that we are apparently living in? How do we interact with it? Who are we? What is the nature of the true I, as opposed to all the labels we give ourselves, which I say, misidentify as the true I? And from that moment on, understanding the nature of reality allowed me to appreciate how things that people call paranormal are actually perfectly normal if you only look at them from a greater perspective, were possible. And I started to realize very clearly that this network of secret societies that I'd been uncovering from 1991 were actually hoarding this knowledge of the nature of reality and how it works and how we interact with it, and selling us a lie that this world is what it appears to be in our experience, which is everything is solid, everything's apart from everything else, because that keeps us in ignorance of the very nature of the reality we're experiencing. And if we don't understand at least the basic foundations of the reality we're experiencing, and we believe it to be absolutely what it's not, then already the population in general is in a fundamentally potential position of manipulation by those few who do know how it works. Because this whole conspiracy to enslave humanity, which I've been exposing for 30 years, and now people are starting to see as it hits the surface and starts to break into human society where we can see it, that whole conspiracy is founded, absolutely founded, on the manipulation of human psychology, based on the manipulation of human perception. And you mentioned there about the media. Well, the media is very, very important to maintaining this this perceptual programming, this perceptual prison that we live in, because perception comes from information received, whether it's personal experience, whether it's 10 o'clock news or newspaper or whatever, Facebook. It's information received that we form our perceptions from. And if you can control that information, you are to a very large extent controlling human perception. And from human perception comes what? Human behavior.
Yes.
In all its forms. So control the information that people receive, you control perception, you control human behavior. And this is why we're seeing this war now on any opinion or information that challenges the official narrative of everything. This is why all this censorship's going on the internet, etc. And so to understand how the world's manipulated is to understand what reality is, and therefore how our psychology and our perceptions can be manipulated. The education system, I mean, what is that? It's not education. It's a perceptual download. From the moment you enter as a little child, just out of the womb, to the time you leave, if you go through to college or university, you're downloading a perceptual program. And then you are tested on it to see how much of the perceptual program you've absorbed in something called exams, where you tell the system what the system's told you to believe, and if you do it well enough, you pass, and if you don't, then you're a disruptive influence in the classroom and a failure. And then you've got the mainstream media that are pounding out this same version of reality and normal. All the governments, government agencies, corporations, etc., are all founded on this perceptual program, because that's all it is, not reality. So is mainstream science, so is mainstream medicine. And if all you hear in your life is one basic set of assumed facts, then that's going to impose itself on your perceptions, and you're going to wave away in dismissal things that are actually true but are at odds with the programmed perceptions that you've downloaded all your life.
Yeah, so all over these years, obviously, you've had a lot of pushback from obviously the power and the medias. And now I presume you've managed to be successful in your endeavors.
Because I don't care. That's the thing. I don't care.
That's my question, is what drives you? What drives you to keep going against? Because a lot of people say, oh, I also believe into all of this. We are getting, say, what can I do? Because if I do anything, I lose my job, I lose my reputation. People are scared though, to voice even doubt.
Yeah, exactly. Because the most insidious form of censorship, which we're now drowning in, is self-censorship.
Yes.
Where people are intimidated into silence, and therefore there's no debate about their opinions. Their opinions are just not voiced. But you see, it's assumption. The world, science is based on assumption. It's not based on fact overwhelmingly. It's on assumption. When you look at things, just a quick aside, like the Big Bang. You look at the so-called Big Bang, where all this came from, and it's a ludicrous idea. I mean, the guy must have been drunk who came up with it. Then all it is a set of assumptions, which what happens is there's an assumption, and then the assumption is repeated and repeated and repeated until it's been repeated so many times that it becomes accepted fact. And it's nothing more than assumption. You look at science and the different elements of it, it's all assumption. But this is another assumption. and this is a very important kind of area that you've raised here. Because the assumption is that if I speak my truth, I will get consequences that will destroy my life. I will lose my job. I will lose my friends. I will lose credibility. And they're the assumptions that frighten people into silence. and self-censorship. Well, they might lose their job. They might lose their friends, who aren't friends at all if they can't respect their friends' right to be what they take themselves to be and have the opinions that they choose to have. They're not friends. So, well, that's easily sorted, that is. If your friends walk away because you speak your truth, then find some more friends who will respect your right to speak the truth. But in terms of your job, you might lose your job. It doesn't mean your life's over. You know, when I look back at my life, I was working for the BBC. I was a national television presenter. I lost my job, in effect, because I was speaking my truth. But I refuse not to. I will not bow to some other person or force, however powerful it may conceive itself to be, not by me, by itself, and let it tell me what I can think and what I can say and what opinions I can have. I'm not having it. And I am the living proof, really, that you can speak your truth and you get challenges. Of course you do. Well, so what? No one said it would be easy. I mean, how much do you want to speak your truth, right? Enough to take the challenges, or do you don't want any challenges? Well, in that case, well, just put your arms out, get the chains on, and carry on with your life in slavery. And what has happened with me is I've spoken my truth. Some of it has appeared years ago, some of it's still now to be far out, a lot of it less far out now because it's happening. And I've had challenges, and challenges come and you meet them and you carry on. You don't assume, then this is what this assumption is, you don't assume that which you are frightened of in terms of consequences has power over you. Because if you look at the dynamic of power, it's not that there is power over us, it's that we give our power away, which is then recycled back to control us. You know, a relative handful of people, which is what we're dealing with at its core, cannot control 7.7 billion people unless most of that 7.7 billion give their power away and acquiesce to the demands of the few. I will not do that. What's the worst that can happen? Okay, I don't know, they shoot me or something. Okay, so the true I, awareness, infinite eternal awareness, which is what is actually experiencing through this body, which is what's talking to you now, the body's just the vehicle, will continue its eternal exploration of forever. Forever! Oh, I'm terrified! But if you fall for the self-identity, which is basically what they're trying to sell us, that we are the body, that we are our name, that we are our income bracket, that we are our life story, instead of that being an experience for the consciousness that we eternally are, then things like consequences start to get control of you. Oh, what will they do to me? Well, if I have to stop, what will they do to me? By ceasing to speak my truth and have my eternal right to my opinion, well, they can do what they bloody like, because I ain't shutting up. And that is a power in itself, because this force controls through intimidation. That's what it does. That's its currency of control. I will not bow to intimidation. I am unintimidatable. Thus, it doesn't have power over me. Not because I'm a special, not because I'm some, messiah, but because I have chosen not to be intimidated by essentially little boys in short trousers who are yet to grow up, who have this desire, because they're little boys in short trousers, to have control over everyone else.
I see. In fact, I must say to those who are listening and who haven't read your book and your books in general, is that you quote quite a lot of science. I was especially I noted especially quite a lot of reference to quantum physics. And being in Geneva here, not too far from the CERN,
Right.
I have quite a lot of friends who work on that, and it's quite fascinating. In fact, you have I don't know hundreds of references to scientific data that backs your thoughts. Because obviously one of the things a lot of people say to people like you and more modestly like me and so on is that they try to label us as conspiracy theories and things like that, as if it was a bad thing. Theory is always interesting to have. And you mentioned Big
Much
Bang.
of it's not theory, though; it's provable fact.
Yes, and I presume you're familiar with Rupert Sheldrake's works and on trying to always challenge any given data, whether it's scientific or because that's by challenging that you find out if something is true, is
Absolutely.
correct,
Yeah,
or if it's
absolutely
wrong
right.
and correct. In fact, I think from reading your book that there's a some of your theories from the past you have proven, or at least you continue to consider them accurate and truth, and some you have abandoned because maybe you consider them not as correct, and you refine them and move forward. So
No,
it
I've
seems
not
to me
abandoned them. I've not abandoned them. No, no, no. I can't think of anything I've abandoned. The second part, you're absolutely right. I've refined them,
refine.
and that happens by um, gathering more and more knowledge. But the basic themes that I started out with all those years ago are still with
Sure.
me. It's just that they're more detailed now,
Yeah.
and I also have I have discerned, if you like, the difference between what is purely interesting. I find almost everything interesting, and what is absolutely crucial for people to know now. So some of the things that I talked about in the past were very, very interesting. I don't talk about so much now because I'm focusing on what I think people need to hear absolutely now.
Now, in your book, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told, you in fact describe our world today as a pretty scary and dystopic. It's not a future; it's a present. And how maybe for our readers, for our viewers, how could you describe the state of the world today? How could you summarize it?
Well, read George Orwell, read Aldous Huxley. See, this unfolding agenda for humanity is not made up by the minute, or the hour, or the day, or even the decade. It goes way back. It's planned way in advance. And if you can uncover that projected agenda for the world, what they want to make happen, then you can start predicting the future, which is what I've done in my books. But I'm not really predicting the future as in a seer pulling it out of the ether.
Yes.
I'm doing it by uncovering what the plan is, and if the plan is not stopped, if there's not something that stops that agenda unfolding, it will unfold. The idea of what I do is to alert so many people that eventually there will be an intervention and it will be stopped. The idea is not to predict the future, but not to predict the future in terms of ensuring it not happening. Up to this point, it just continues to unfold, although vastly more people are aware of it now than were before. Just look around us. I mean, back in the 1990s, I talked about the war on freedom of speech was coming. Well, we're there. I was talking about the cashless society and the fact that it was nothing to do with money and everything to do with control, and that you were going to have a society where there was nothing except one digital electronic currency, and we're moving towards the cashless society now so fast. Not because I pulled it out the ether, but if you know what the plan is and no one intervenes in it, it's going to happen, and it is happening. And so many other things, a stream of things that were in my books years ago have either happened or are happening, because there is a plan for the total control of humanity by in the end, totally controlling human thought and emotion via artificial intelligence. This artificial intelligence that's coming in, and it's far more advanced than people realize, because there's technology we see in the public arena, and then there's the technology in the underground bases and the secret projects, which is light years ahead of what we see, and because it's not a case of sitting around waiting for somebody to invent the next level of technology which will take the control of humanity on further. But in fact, it's already existing, and it's just a matter of playing it out into the public arena in a sequence, which is why it's happening so fast. Then this whole AI agenda, this 5G agenda, this smart agenda, is rolling out so fast, and together they are planned to connect AI to the human brain. Google executives are talking about it, have been for a long time, and they even give a timescale of around 2030. And the whole world, everything we do, everything that happens, everything that we think and everything we feel is designed to come from artificial intelligence. Already, if people just lift their eyes from the game show and the sporting event. I mean, I love sport, but, not only sport. I mean, I do tend to look around. And when you do, you realize how far this has gone. And artificial intelligence now is increasingly, and not too far into the future, will complete the job of taking over the military. And they're already developing and introducing military technology where AI decides if it kills someone or not. And it's taking over. It's like a kind of a version of the Matrix in the movie series where machines take over the world. This is what's happening. Just look around. And what we've seen is a systematic sequence whereby first the idea was to get people addicted, particularly the young, to technology that they hold. Well, the vast numbers of the world anyway, are now addicted to technology. Technology is not serving them, they're serving it. Just like a drug addict is not served by the drug, they serve the drug. And then they move on, because there's a very clear sequence from what you hold to technology on the body, which is legion now. And the idea all along is to get in the body, and they're already microchipping people in places like Sweden in the thousands. And all this was in my books decades ago. Not because I'm a genius, not because I pull it out of the ether, but because you uncover the agenda and you predict the future if the agenda isn't stopped. And so this whole 5G now that's being rolled out without any independent testing, official independent testing, is a weapon. It's a military weapon. That's where it's come from. This millimeter wave frequency band of 5G. And it's being rolled out without any testing, and it's going to be catastrophic. Independent scientists say that, not just me. Because this control grid, controlled by AI, is only possible to function as they want it to function by at least 5G level of communicative power. That's why it's being rolled out. That's why people like Elon Musk are putting up satellites aimed to be, in the end, 20,000 or more, firing the Wi-Fi internet at every inch of the planet, so you won't be able to escape from it.
Yeah, this is, by the way, on the side note, another, let's say, a group that has predicted these things, albeit in the disguise of fiction. As you mentioned, Orwell, actually more Aldous Huxley is probably also one. But a lot of movies, a lot of the things in the cinema seems to be, of course, it's entertaining, but it's also messages, perhaps, to a few people who get it.
Well,
do you think there's a role there of the media, of the entertainment industry, to actually tell a few of us some alarm, some of what's happening?
Well, you could interpret it like that, and in some cases that might be true. But there's also another way of looking at it, and it relates to something known as preemptive programming.
Yes.
The world that we're being taken into is so fantastically different from the one that we've been used to. Certainly someone like me, born in 1952, when I grew up in the 50s and 60s, the world was very different to what it is now.
You look much younger.
Yeah, well, you know, I eat well. But the whole thing about smartphones and computers and all these things, we didn't have them, and full enough, didn't miss them. Isn't that amazing? We actually talk to each other. Have everyone tried that? So the world that we're being taken into is so different that is an obvious resistance potential of people going, hold on a minute, you want to do what? I mean, have you heard what they want to do? So what they do is they prepare you psychologically by pounding out movies and TV programs, as you rightly identify, which portray the world they want to take us into. So as it comes in for real, that chasm of it's so different is diluted, because subconsciously, even consciously, but absolutely subconsciously, you have a familiarity with it because of all the movies and stuff that you've seen. So that's another way of looking at it, because, like I keep saying, I can't emphasize it enough. This whole conspiracy is about hijacking the psychology, perception of the human race.
Now, through your books and excellent presentations, now fairly available, widely available on the internet, and also from your website, which is davidicke.com. I'll put the links down in the description. You are able to touch millions of people. What can people do to act? Because once we understand the danger, once we identify the problem, what do we do?
Well, yeah, I get to a lot of people, but nothing like the numbers that I would if the circulation of my information wasn't suppressed and shadow banned, as they call it, not least on social media. Because that's what they do to people now. If they don't outright ban them, they shadow ban them. So you can actually post it, but just make sure it don't go anywhere like the number of places that it would otherwise have done. Because the system's now frightened of this information because of the impact it's having. I mean, I've been around the world several times in the last few years, and there is an awakening going on. You don't see it on the mainstream news or in mainstream newspapers. They'll be the last to see it. Yeah. But in mainstream society, having been on this road for 30 years, I've seen the difference. The difference is phenomenal in people now who are opening their minds to the fact that the world's not like they thought it was. So that's fantastic. A lot to be positive about. And the fact that they're trying to shut you down just confirms what an effect you're having. But in the end, you know, it comes back to perception, and it comes back to self-identity. We have to first of all let go of the labels, because the labels limit us, can totally limit us. One of the things, as I said earlier, that labels do, if you fall into that level of perceptual reality, is you fall into fear about consequences and stuff like that. When you are coming from the self-identity that you are consciousness, eternally exploring forever, then what seem to be terrible consequences I must avoid by silencing myself or not doing anything cease to be controlling consequences, because to you they're just an experience. They're not really a consequence, they're an experience. Some of the worst, perceptually worst, people would think, things that have happened to me have been the greatest gifts. You know, I went through in Britain in the 1990s historic levels of ridicule because I was a well-known person. I was saying strange things. I went through historic levels of ridicule. The greatest gift I could be given, because it set me free of the concern about what other people think, which is the greatest freedom anybody can have, because most people are not living their life, their truth. they're living what they think is acceptable to other people, and thus other people's truth, perception, is being imposed on them by them acquiescing to what they believe other people want them to be. I don't care what people want me to be. I'm going to be me. And so that alone is a fantastic freedom, because what it means is you open your mouth and you say what you believe. You don't have the mental gymnastics that says before you speak, how can I put this in ways they won't think I'm crazy? How can I, what can I leave out so they'll think I'm an all right person? I don't care what they think. It's no interest to me. I speak my truth and people make of it what they will. It's simple as that. So in the end, it all comes down to perception, because from perception comes everything else. You know, whether we can go into those levels in the time we have, I don't know. But I go into in the books, in the fact that this reality is basically, the dynamic is basically like a computer and Wi-Fi. You know, you have Wi-Fi, which you can't see. It's a radiation field of information, extraordinary levels of information. What do they call it now? The cloud. And that information is in a certain form. It's in a radiation waveform state. But you get a computer which can decode that information, and it puts it on the computer screen in a totally different form. And this world that we experience as the world is like a computer screen. The base form of this world is waveform information, potentiality and possibility, waiting to be decoded into manifestation. And so what dictates what we manifest from this potentiality and possibility, these fields of possibility and probability, what dictates what we decode into what we call an experience and what we don't? I say perception. For this reason, everything in our reality is a frequency. Every thought and type of thought is a different frequency. Every emotion is a different frequency. So love is a frequency and hate is a very different frequency, and you can feel it. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, people talk about good vibes and bad vibes. Well, what are they? They're frequencies that are given off from people by their perceptual state in that moment. You know, people say you go into a room, you cut the atmosphere with a knife. Well, what is the atmosphere? Mm-hmm. What is this word we call atmosphere? It's the energetic field impregnated by whatever perceptual state and emotional state is being generated in that room or has recently been generated.
And that means that our brain interprets that and then sends the hormones and therefore it changes your mood.
Yeah, well, what we call hormones and the chemical level of the body is just a reaction. It's a holographic expression of the vibrational state, the frequency state, because everything's a frequency. A poison is a frequency. Everything's a frequency. And so if we look at how we manifest reality and how some people manifest this reality and some people manifest that reality, imagine that the body brain is a biological computer system, which I say it basically is, and what is experiencing through that system is the real I, consciousness. And the computer will decode from Wi-Fi what it is encoded to access. So someone likes sport, they'll go to a sport website, and your computer will pull the sport website onto the screen. Someone is interested in science, they'll go to a science website, and your computer, with that coding, will pull that website onto the screen. Well, the encoding of the dynamic between us and possibility, probability, the cosmic Wi-Fi, if you like, is perception. because a perceptional state is a frequency state. If you believe that you are little me, that's your perception, you have no power, you are only your labels, and if your label tells you you are someone who works on a checkout in a supermarket and you've got no power and you're just little, you've got no power to do anything. If you take on that perception, which is a nonsense, but if you take on that perception, you will reflect in terms of frequency, both in range and level of frequency, type of frequency, that perception. So you're now interacting with the cosmic field of possibility and probability within that band of frequency, on that band of frequency, and that feedback loop will actually deliver to you experience that reflects your perception. So little me perception leads to little me experience. You change your self-identity, and people say, what can I do? I would say this is the bottom line. Change your self-identity. Let the labels go. The labels are experiences. Don't get caught in them. They're transitory, short experiences. There'll be another one along in a minute. What you are is the consciousness having the experience. That is not the real I, the labels. They're what the real I is experiencing. But if you therefore self-identify with being consciousness, awareness, forget the body and all the rest of it, you're just awareness. And that awareness can be have a focus of attention that believes it is someone who works on the checkout in the supermarket, or it can be an expanded state of awareness which identifies with being awareness, and potentially all awareness. It's just a matter of how much programming you want to let go to let the true I in its full magnitude. Now, that self-identity, I am all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience, I am all possibility, having an experience, is interacting with the cosmic field of possibility and probability in a much more expanded way and a higher frequency way. And you are able to therefore develop a feedback loop of experience and possibility to manifest into your reality that is vastly greater than someone who says, I'm just little me, I'm just Bill who drives a bus, that's all I am. And if you look at what people are bombarded with from cradle to grave, systematically, it's to self-identify with labels. I mean, look what we're seeing now. The labels are being subdivided and subdivided into smaller and smaller labels. People's self-identity is becoming myopic. And the more you do that, the more that you are limiting your perception of self, thus limiting your ability to manifest a greater reality, a greater experience. I won't fall for that. David Icke is the name for my current experience. That's all. What I am is the consciousness having the experience. And whatever anyone does to me or says about me, then I will still go on eternally exploring forever. So things that people think are these massive all consequences, first of all, I'll tell you from experience, thinking about it is much worse than doing it. Oh yeah, but what might happen? Then you do it, and you think, well, this is not as bad as I thought. Yeah. And all that time, you stop yourself doing it, being afraid of what doing it would bring in terms of consequences. And now you're doing it, you say, well, it's not so bad. So just do it in the first place. And you'll find, if you speak your truth, I'm an experience. I am an example, but there are many, many, many other examples. I mean, an unbelievable number of examples I've come across around the world. You speak your truth, and you appear to get consequences. Maybe you lose your job, but suddenly something else comes along, because what we call coincidences are not coincidences, they're self-manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
This is why when people go through this process of deprogramming their perceptions from what they've been told to believe and just let their mind go free, they say, I woke up, that's what they say. Well, one of the constant themes that you hear from people like that, and my goodness me, I experienced it myself, is when it starts to happen, you start to experience amazing coincidences in your life, which you weren't experiencing before. But you see, if you are living your life believing in little me, I have no power, you are interacting with possibility and probability in such a narrow band that you're not going to manifest amazing coincidences and opportunities and things that drop in your lap just at the right time. You're not going to do it. But you expand, this is what happens in the awakening process, you expand your self-identity, thus you expand your perception of possibility. Now you are interacting with possibility and probability at a level and on a scale where you can start to manifest these amazing coincidences that drop in your lap just at the right time. And this is why it happens. You know, that so many things drive me on. The people who are ill who don't need to be drives me on. The people who are crushed who don't need to be crushed, who are suppressed who don't need to be suppressed. People in poverty who don't need to be in poverty. They drive me on. But also, what drives me on is seeing people who believe in their own limitation and thus experience that limitation when they are limitlessness. Their limits are only the limits they impose upon themselves, which comes from the perception of themselves. Which is why I go back to what I said earlier. The whole foundation of this conspiracy is controlling perception. If they can control your perception individually and collectively, they got you. They got everything. They've got your behavior. They've got everything. So we've got to take our perceptions back. We've got to take an understanding back of how we interact with reality and realize that we are actually in control, not some external force. The external force is manipulating our reality and thus our experience by hijacking, hacking into the processes through which we create our experience. They're constantly telling us we're little me, we have no power, we have to look up to other people to be told what to think. Oh, yeah, consequences if you do that. Oh, better not do it then. They're hacking into our perceptual processes. We have to take them back. And when we do, this world will absolutely transform. Because this world that we call the world and how the world is merely a expression, a holographic expression actually, but a computer screen expression, shall we say, of human collective perception. Mm-hmm. You and me now, we could have a gigantic argument. That's a choice. If my perception of you was a certain way, your perception of me was a certain way, we could have a gigantic argument. But our perceptions of each other are not like that. So we're having a nice chat.
And maybe we choose to select the things that put us in the right direction instead of the things that may bring an argument.
Yeah, exactly. And you've kind of brought up another part of this there in a way, because there is a difference between this and this.
Sure.
The head, the brain, processes information. Just processes information, and whatever information it receives, it processes. This is why it's possible, very, very possible these days, to externally fire frequencies at people. I mean, this has been known for decades. Mm-hmm. Fire frequencies at people within the frequency band that the brain works on. And you can put thoughts, perceptions, and thus actions into the minds of people because the brain is processing information. And basically the brain is taking information and it's like you receive information and you come to conclusions from that information.
Yes.
This, the heart, not the physical heart that energetic heart in the human energetic system here. This is where we get intuition from. So this takes information and tries to work it out. What does it mean? This knows what it means. Why? Because this is connected to a more expanded state of awareness, a more expanded state of the cosmic Wi-Fi field, if you like. And thus it comes from a level that potentially, if we allow it to manifest, from a level that does know. And it doesn't have to work it out. That's why when you get an intuitive feeling, it's not an intuitive, or my intuition's just thinking about it. No, I just know. And look at it. Look at the body language, which tells you so much, because the body's just an expression of the mind. When people say, I just know, they go here, don't they? I just know. I know what I've got to do. And when people say, I'm thinking, they go, I'm thinking. They point to where that's coming from. And what's happened, and it's been systematic, is that the head has usurped the heart. The thinking level, the so-called intellect, which is a very low level of perception, has usurped the knowing level of the intuition. And what transformed my life 30 years ago was when I made the decision that when my intuition, knowing, and my thinking were in conflict, I was going to go with my heart. I was going to go with my intuition. And what it does, it gets you into some scrapes, because this is not seeing the world the same way. This couldn't care less what people say about you. Couldn't, because it sees the big picture and realizes it doesn't matter. And therefore, it's going to take you into areas, and you're going to do things, and you're going to say things from here that people who are in here still are going to think are crazy, mad, dangerous. We must silence him. But there comes a point, if you keep going with this, is my experience, where this observes the fact, with the passage of events, that when you go with your heart, you might get some challenges. You're bound to, because you're going to be at odds with mainstream society that's coming from here. But it all works out in the end. And it don't just work out despite your challenges, but because of them. And this point comes where this and this think and feel the same. So for a long time now, decades now, when my heart intuition says, I need to do this, this goes, okay, let's go. Whereas in most people, and before, this would say, you can't do that. What will people say about you? What will the people at work say? What about the people down the bar? What were they going to say about you? What about your mother? She'll be upset. And this goes, I just know, so I'm going to do it. And like I say, after a while, this gets it and comes with you. And the war ends, the war between this and this, which is such a disease in the human family.
Well, you almost answered my next question, which is that I'm writing, one of my next books I'm writing on is about fear and how you master and manage your fears or control them. And indeed, it seems even, and you explain it in your book, that we live in an extremely scary world. And fear may block the process you just described.
Exactly.
Because we're scared to actually put this synchronicity between our thoughts and our feelings. How, you have children, you have friends, you have families, and a vast audience. How would you tell them of a simple way to put that synchronicity, how to do that?
Well, it's not for me to tell them anything. It's for me to put out information and let them decide what they choose to believe, and therefore how they choose to act. The last thing this world needs, because we're drowning in them, is another pseudo guru saying, I have all the answers, you've got to believe me, this is what you do. What my whole philosophy on life is people taking their power back and them deciding what they do and what they think based on the information that they receive, and they make choices and come to perceptions from that. So it's not for me to tell anyone what to do. I can give my own experience as part of this exchange of information, and it's it all. In the end, it again comes down to our perceptual state and an understanding of the frequency nature of our reality. You mentioned fear. Well, fear is an emotion we feel in the level of the five senses, which takes people into rigidity, fear. What do people say? He froze with fear. Mm-hmm. Well, what's happening is fear, that perceptual state, is a very, very low, slow frequency. And when that is running through our energetic field, our energy field slows, becomes denser and denser. And the denser it becomes, the less the range that it's interacting with possibility and probability, and it's pulling you into a state of enormous limitation. We experience it in the limitation of, I'm so frightened, I'm not going to speak my truth, or I'm so frightened, I'm just going to run away. But that is just an expression of the energetic level of it, which is this fear frequency is pulling you into density. This is why when you feel depressed and anxious, people say, I feel so heavy today. And then when you feel joy, you say, I feel so light today, because joy is a very high frequency and vibrates your energetic field to that frequency, and you feel light because you're not in density anymore. So fear is an absolute tool of this conspiracy. They want people in fear. This is what intimidating people into silence is all about. What is it? Intimidation, frightening them into silence. But fear, people say that someone has courage. But what is courage? Courage is overcoming fear. That's what it is. But if you don't fall for fear, you don't need courage, because you've got nothing to overcome. And, my philosophy is basically this. Instead of having consequences dictate my actions, I dictate my actions, and consequences will take care of themselves, not least because I don't really care. Why? Because if consequences mean I don't speak my truth, I don't say what I believe to be true, I don't have the right to my opinion, then there are no greater consequences for me than not having a right to an opinion, not having a right to free speech, not having a right to to communicate what I believe. That's the worst consequence of all. All the other consequences, this might happen, they might do this, might do that, are infinitesimal to me compared with the consequences that would manifest as you can't say and communicate what you believe to be right. So if I fall for the other consequences and shut myself down and silence myself and censor myself, then I've actually, in my way I view life, I've actually imposed upon myself the worst consequence of all. There's no worse consequence than being silenced or self-silencing, because from that every other freedom disappears. Freedom of speech is the foundation freedom from which everything else comes. There is no other freedom if there's not freedom of speech. And so that's the bottom line consequence. All the others will have to take care of themselves, because I'm not taking that fight. I'm not taking that bottom line consequence. I won't have it. And if people just spoke their truth and refused to be intimidated into silence, they would see an amazing thing. They'd realize that the power over them has gone, has disappeared, and that actually all along that fear that was controlling them was an illusion. You know, when I was a footballer, I was a goalkeeper, and I used to sit in the dressing room. And the worst part of being a professional footballer for me was sitting in the dressing room before the game started, because all the things that could go wrong in the game were going through your head. When you actually got on the pitch and started doing it, most of the time everything was fine. But sitting in the dressing room beforehand, oh, what if I drop the ball? What if this? What if that? What if the other? And that's how people live their lives. What if? What if? What if? Well, try it, and then you'll know what if, and you'll realize that what if is nothing like as bad as you thought it was. And what can be worse than to be silenced? What a conceding of dignity. What a conceding of self-respect to allow some external force, whatever form it may take, dictating what you should think and what you should say and what opinions you can have. It's outrageous, but people fall for it because they see consequences in massive terms when actually they're not as massive as they think they are.
Yes, perhaps a last question. Do you foresee an awakening of people, or do you foresee a collapse of the structure that tries to dominate us in the near future? And if yes, when do you foresee that? Well, perhaps foreseeing is not the right word. Is if you expect.
Well, one is necessary for the other, because I mean I keep going back to this, but our belief in the system on an energetic level is holding the system together. You know, it's like people standing on each other's shoulders and forming a pyramid. You know, while the people stay in the pyramid exists. When people walk away from the pyramid collapses, because what's holding it together is not there anymore. And our belief and our trust in the system and what it tells us to believe is actually a construct of consciousness that's holding it together. When we withdraw our belief in it, withdraw our dependency upon it and our belief in it, then it will fall, because we no longer hold that consciousness construct together. It's like sitting in a prison cell and the prisoners are holding the walls up. And if they just walk away, the walls will collapse, and that's what will happen to this system. So we have to stop believing in it, because it's a hoax. What we're told to believe, what I call the postage stamps consensus, this range of normal that is taught in the schools, the universities, the colleges, mainstream media, etc., etc., that belief system in what is perceived to be normal is what's holding it together. When to be in that mode of perception that holds it together, you must believe in labels. You must self-identify with labels. The two go together. So when you stop identifying the I with your labels, and you realize their experiences, and you start identifying with the infinite I, consciousness, that very shift in self-identity will withdraw you from holding this system together, because you will be withdrawing from the frequency in which this construct we call the world exists. It exists within a band of frequency. And if you only operate within that band of frequency, all your perceptions and all the information from which you form them is coming from within that band of frequency. You're in the world and of it. When you expand your awareness through expanding self-identity, you start to access levels of awareness, consciousness that are beyond the construct. And at that point, you start to see things certainly you see that in completely different terms. You start to see through it. Instead of seeing dots, you see pictures and patterns. You start to realize what you're part of. And that's why they have to hold us in this concentrated focus level of normal perception, and to police it by giving a hard time to anyone that breaks out of it. That's the bottom line of everything. It's perception is everything. And you know that from one level because the whole conspiracy is based on controlling human perception. And you can either find a solution to a problem or you can withdraw the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem is that we've had our perceptions hijacked and focused. If you want to remove the cause of the problem, you withdraw from the programmed perception, and you let your mind wander into all possibility. And then the whole construct of control must fall. Because this ultimately tiny group that are at the core of this global spider's web of control humanity via humanity. We are that which creates this world. They are the ones that create this world via imposing and implanting our perceptions of this world, which then becomes a collective expression of itself that we call the world. When we, that middle conduit in this sequence, take our perceptions back and stop having them externally implanted, then that few, which can only control via the human mind, loses its power, and the whole world changes. And if we lived in the world that we appear to be experiencing, a solid world of enormous limitation, and everything that is to change that world has to happen in a physical way, then I'd say, well, I'm wasting my time here. I might as well just live out the rest of my life and have as nice a life as I can, because I'm wasting my bloody time, because we've got no chance. But that's not the level that the change takes place. The level, this world exists because of the programmed perceptions of humanity. Deprogram those perceptions, this world changes, because it's just an expression of human consciousness made manifest. So from that perspective of how we change things, we can change them tomorrow. There is no time scale even necessary, just a choice of how many people take their minds back. And the more that do, the more the world will change. And it's beginning to change, because more and more people are taking their minds back. And hallelujah to that.
Well, I see that even if you are the more, let's say, my books are much more down to earth on the physical level. How you survive daily, how you get your, if economies collapses, if there is civil war, how do you survive? So your books are a completely different level. And I encourage people to get and reach this level, because in fact you're an optimistic guy, I think. Your message is very optimistic.
Very.
So I encourage people to read your latest book and your other books, David Icke, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. And should you ever be in Switzerland, let me know.
Okay. Can I just mention one thing
Sure.
Before we finish? I've got a movie coming out on the 4th of June, which people can access through davidicke.com. It's a feature film type movie about my life in a way, but actually what it's about is a vast amount of information across all these different subjects, what we've talked about here and many, many more. Mm-hmm. It's gone down fantastically well in premieres that we've had. It's been shot by an American film company and edited by them as well. And I'm very hopeful that this is going to be a vehicle for people who are new to this information, mm-hmm. to see it in a very accessible way. And one of the very encouraging things about it, it's called Renegade, is that people who've been to the premieres who kind of know about my work, but they've taken people with them who don't. have been saying what an impact the film had on the people who were only seeing the information for the first time. So that's very encouraging, because that's why we made the film, really.
Excellent. Well, I will put the link down in the description of this video.
Okay, mate. Thanks.
I thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And see you another time.
Been a great pleasure. Thanks, mate. Bye.